We begins in the future with a character named Izzy. He lives in a residential neighborhood called the Kitchen District. This district is a housing project on the outskirts of London. It becomes apparent that the people in this neighborhood are extremely poor to the point that each group of them shares only one bathroom. Izzy enters the bathroom and encounters all the residents waiting outside. They are all in a hurry and eager to use the bathroom. At the same time, a group of young people from the Back district, led by a guy named Stab, attacks a food truck. Stab gets into Stab's car and tells the driver that they have no problems with him and don't want any trouble. The driver complies with Stab's request and stops the car. Meanwhile, a radio announcer named Kitch is heard speaking to the residents of the Back district about a place where food is distributed. Kitch encourages the residents to unite against the government because they want to evict them from their homes and develop the area into residences for the rich. After leaving the bathroom, Izzy receives a message from a specific company. He has applied for an apartment in the wealthy neighborhood, and it appears that Izzy doesn't have enough money to pay the deposit. He decides to take the offer until he can gather the full amount. Izzy heads to his job at a company called Life After Life, which is known for burying poor people who cannot afford funeral costs. The company buries their bodies under trees so that their families can visit them at any time they want. In the company, there is an old man with his daughter, and Izzy is with them. The old man understands that after his death, he will be transformed into a tree and will remain in the company for 20 days, during which his family can visit him. Afterward, the tree will be moved to another location outside the city. The old man is fascinated by the idea of becoming a tree because it means he won't need a grave for his family to visit. Izzy accompanies the old man and tells him that if his family had money, they would have held a grand funeral and bought him a grave. Unfortunately, they are poor and cannot afford the funeral expenses. If they spend all their money on a grave and funeral, they won't be able to sustain their lives afterward, and they will die of starvation. Izzy asks him to be compassionate towards his family and relieve them of this burden. The old man is convinced by Izzy's words and agrees to transform into a tree after his death. Later, Izzy is seen with his colleague at work, named Demi. Demi asks Izzy if he is still considering leaving the Back district. Izzy responds that he will leave the neighborhood very soon because he knows the government will take over the area at any cost. It becomes evident that Izzy only cares about himself and no one else, and he doesn't care about Demi's words, about resistance and defending the place they live in. Then Izzy goes to the control panel and learns that there is a funeral for someone named Tony. Between Saddam and Izzy, he quickly goes to the funeral room and sees Tony's son saying goodbye. It becomes clear that Tony's son is deeply affected and very sad about his mother's death. Then Tony's son takes his mother's tree and places it in the designated spot. At the end of the day, Izzy is outside of the company, but he is stopped by Tony's son, who tells him that he saw him at the funeral and asks if he knew his mother. Izzy is taken aback and hesitates, and then he tells Tony's son that his relationship with his mother was superficial, and he left and walked away. Tony's son is left alone on the sidewalk, very sad and surprised when he arrives at his house. There, Izzy learns that Tony's son will move from his house to a care center because he cannot afford the house expenses. Izzy asks Tony's son where he lives, and he tells him that he lives in the Kitchen District. Tony's son tells him that his mother said his father would remain one of the residents of the Kitchen District. Izzy becomes emotional, but he doesn't respond and walks away. At night, Tony's son goes to the district, searching for Izzy. He encounters Stab and his friends, who approach him and ask what he does in the neighborhood. Tony's son gets scared and thinks they want to rob him, but Stab reassures him and tells him that they are not bad people. Tony's son tells Izzy that he is looking for a person named Izzy and that he has nowhere to live because he was evicted from the apartment he lived in with his mother, who passed away. Stab sympathizes with him and takes him to his house. There, Stab introduces Tony's son to his other friends. At night, Tony's son is upset and sad about his situation, and he continues to cry. At the same time, Izzy is in his apartment, and it is evident that he is thinking about something specific and unable to sleep. The next day, the radio announcer Kitch plays music on the radio, as he does every day, and addresses all the residents of the neighborhood, motivating them to endure the difficult life they are living. Meanwhile, Stab wakes up Tony's son and takes him with him and his friends to the rooftop of the building. And there, Benji finds Stab and his friends working on their drones, which they use to disrupt the police surveillance. However, Stab and his friends are not successful in hitting the drones, but they acknowledge that Benji has exceptional skills in targeting and hitting the drones. They praise Benji for his work, and then Benji goes down with Stab and his friends to the street. At that moment, Izzy is outside the restaurant and becomes surprised when he sees Benji with Stab. They approach him and ask what he is doing in the neighborhood, and Izzy is annoyed by Benji's presence with Stab. He tells him that he was looking for him everywhere and couldn't find him, so Stab took him to stay at his house. While they are talking, the residents of the neighborhood start coming out of their windows and banging on kitchenware, creating a loud noise. This is a signal that the police forces are attacking the neighborhood. Izzy takes Benji and rushes with him to his apartment. They enter the apartment and lock the door behind them. Izzy looks outside and sees the police attacking the residents of the neighborhood, beating them and forcing them out of their houses. He realizes that the police are gradually taking over their homes, and those who can't enter their apartments and lock themselves in are being apprehended. Izzy tells Benji that the day will come when the police will launch a major attack on the residents, and he will stand up against them all at once. Then Izzy asks Benji to distance himself from Stab and his gang because they engage in violent acts against the police. Moreover, they carry out attacks on the areas where the rich live, robbing them. Izzy warns Benji that if he gets involved with them in any of their activities, he might be caught, and at that point, Stab and his friends won't be able to save him. Benji is left wondering why Izzy is so interested in him, and we understand that Benji senses that Izzy is his father, whom his mother told him about before she passed away. But Izzy remains silent and doesn't respond to him. He goes back to his apartment, refusing to take Benji with him, and tells him that he will leave the place soon. However, Benji insists and asks him to let him stay for a couple of days until he sorts out his affairs and finds a job and a place to live. Izzy shows compassion and agrees to let him stay in his apartment for 2 days. After that, Izzy takes Benji with him to his workplace, where Izzy teaches Benji a specific phrase about his experience of turning his mother into a tree. This is so that he can say it in front of the customers who visit the company and convince them of the service and get them to subscribe to it. As a result, Izzy earns a lot of money from them. However, Benji forgets the phrase that Izzy taught him, and Izzy gets frustrated when Benji speaks genuine words in front of the customers. Benji tells them that whenever he looks at the tree, he imagines that it's his real mother and that he has to take care of her and protect her for the rest of his life. The customers are moved by Benji's words and treat him kindly. At night, Izzy takes Benji and goes to the amusement park, and Izzy is very happy watching Benji enjoy himself. By coincidence, Demi is also present at the park and sees Izzy. She approaches him and asks about Benji, but Izzy denies knowing him. Demi takes Izzy and goes to have a drink, and Benji is surprised when he realizes that Izzy has disappeared. He continues searching for him everywhere but can't find him. Then he sees Stab and his friends in Beirut, playing and having fun together. They go to a nightclub and continue dancing and singing all night. The next day, Benji is at Stab's house, and while they are having breakfast, Stab asks Benji about his relationship with Izzy. Benji tells him that Izzy is his friend. Then Stab talks to Benji privately and tells him that the government wants to take their land at any cost and give it to the rich to build luxurious buildings and make a lot of money from it. Stab says that the government has cut off their water supply and prevented food from reaching them. That's why he and his friends defend their land and fight against the government. They also engage in theft to help the residents of the neighborhood. Stab asks Benji to join them and be one of them. He offers Benji a motorcycle and tells him that it will be his from this moment on. Benji agrees to join them, and they go together to a bike race. Benji is very happy with his new friends and his new life. Later, he meets a girl named Ruby, and they sit together and talk. Suddenly, Izzy appears, laughing and looking for Benji. Izzy takes the motorcycle and leaves with Stab, leaving Benji behind. Then they go to a restaurant and have dinner together. Benji feels upset and hungry because Izzy left him alone the previous night. Hers was sold to Izzy, but he advised him to get used to living his life alone. Izzy tells him his story and says that his father and mother died when he was young and that he lived his life and faced difficulties without anyone's help. Benji is happy when Izzy tells him that he will live with him forever. His appetite opens up, and he continues eating breakfast. The days pass, and Izzy and Benji become closer to each other, appearing like a father and son living their normal lives together. However, one day, Izzy goes to the company from which he was evicted from his new apartment. It turns out that Izzy managed to gather the down payment for the apartment, and he watches the apartment models to choose one. He asks the robot to show him models of a 2-bedroom apartment because he wants Benji to live with him permanently. The robot confirms his request, and here Izzy hesitates and can't make a decision because he doesn't know if he will be able to afford the rent for the 2-bedroom apartment. Night falls, and Benji asks Izzy what happened with the new apartment. Izzy tells him that he wants to work to help him pay the rent, but Izzy doesn't respond to Benji, leaves him, and goes to sleep. The next day, Izzy and Benji are in the restaurant having breakfast, and suddenly Izzy tells Benji that he has to go on a trip and will return to him. Benji waits for Izzy in the restaurant all day, but unfortunately, Izzy doesn't come back. Benji feels abandoned and decides to leave him. The next day, Izzy is in his new apartment, which is definitely much better than his apartment in the kitchen district. We return to the kitchen district again, and Benji finds Stab and his friends distributing food and clothes to the people of the neighborhood. Benji is sitting in Izzy's apartment, feeling sad because Izzy left him alone. Suddenly, the police attack the neighborhood as usual, and Benji tries to get back to his home quickly, but she gets tired when she sees the police arresting her mother. She runs quickly and knocks on Izzy's apartment door. He sees Benji from behind the door and opens it for her. At the same time, the police attack Kitchen's apartment, trying to arrest him, but he resists. They torture and beat him, and all the residents of the neighborhood hear his voice as he screams because the microphone is on at that time. At night, we find out that Kitchen was killed by the police forces. Therefore, all the residents of the Kitchen district come out of their windows and light a fire as an expression of their sorrow for Kitchen's death. Translation: 66666. The next day, most of the residents of the Kitchen district gather their belongings and leave the area. Benji goes to Stab and his friends, who are upset about what happened. At the same time, Izzy is busy with his work and feels guilty when he sees many people from the Kitchen district going to a funeral in Beirut. He discovers that it's the funeral of Kitchen, and the residents are in deep grief and anger. They sing songs that Kitchen used to sing every day to keep their spirits up. Izzy is also deeply saddened when he learns about what happened and goes to Benji, who is with Stab and his friends. They decide to seek revenge for Kitchen's death and go to the commercial market. They break into shops, steal everything inside, and Benji accompanies Stab to the house of a wealthy family. Stab releases all his anger by breaking things in the house, while the family members are terrified. Benji is scared and runs back to his home. The next day, Izzy visits Benji in his cramped house and asks him to leave and forget about him. However, Izzy reassures him that he won't leave him again and gives him his mother's tree as a symbol of their bond. Benji thanks Izzy and they go up to the rooftop, screaming together. Suddenly, the police forces attack the neighborhood, and the people run as fast as they can. The police chase them, and Stab and his friends fall into a trap. The police surround them from all sides, and the residents throw rocks from the rooftops to defend themselves. The police officers try to protect themselves with shields and call for backup, but the rocks break through the shields. Izzy stays with Benji in the apartment, witnessing everything that's happening. In this chaos, Benji asks Izzy if he is his father, and Izzy confirms it, telling him that he will take him to live in the new apartment. Our film ends for tonight, and now all you have to do is support us by liking and subscribing to the channel. We leave you now in peace. We wish you success and, of course, sweet dreams.